The ringtone should have been impossible. My father's old number lit up my screen. 10 digits I'd stopped myself from dialing 100 times over the last 8 years. And my stomach dropped so fast, I actually swayed. For a second, I thought I was looking at it wrong. The faded wallpaper in the Carter family living room swam at the edges of my vision, all brown flowers and nicotine ghosts. The old clock on the mantel ticked too loud. My army duffel sat half unpacked by the sofa, boots still dusty from the drive-in. The phone kept buzzing in my hand. Dad. The contact name I'd never deleted. The phone we'd buried with him. Same number. Same little anchor emoji I'd added when I was 17 and proud of his Navy stories. My thumb hovered over the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I could feel the pulse in my throat. This isn't real, I thought. It's a misdial, a recycled number, a glitch. But I answered. Hello? Static hissed in my ear, thick, crackling, like a radio on a bad channel. For a second, there was nothing else. Just my own breathing and the distant hollow hum of Cedar Hollow traffic through the old house's cracked windows. Then a voice pushed through the noise. Sweetheart, you don't have much time. I went cold. Dad? The word felt like it scraped my lungs on the way out. Dad, is that? More static, a high, whining squeal that made me flinch. Then, he's coming. The voice was his. Not kind of like his. Not close. His. Rough around the edges from too many cigarettes, softened by age and something the chaplain had called regret at the funeral. He sounded afraid. The line snapped dead. Silence flooded the room so hard my ears rang. The call log flashed on my screen for half a second. John Carter, mobile, before the number disappeared. One blink and it was gone. No recent call, no missed call. Nothing. My hand shook. I'd done live comms checks in Afghanistan with artillery rumbling so close the walls shook. I'd kept my voice level, talking pilots down in a storm. I'd stood in front of a colonel with news that should have ended a career and not stuttered once. But here, in my dead parents' living room in Ohio, one ghost call from a buried phone had me gripping the back of the couch to stay upright. I stared at the empty screen like I could will the number back. The house creaked around me, the old furnace kicking on with a low thunk and a gust of lukewarm air that smelled faintly of dust and old carpet. Lily, Mrs. Callahan called from next door, voice muffled through the thin wall. You need anything, honey? I swallowed hard, cleared my throat. I'm good, I called back, my voice unsteady. Just tired from the drive. All right then, she said. Soup's on the porch if you get hungry. Her footsteps retreated. A floorboard in her kitchen squealed like it always had. I looked at my phone one more time. 8 years since we lowered Dad into the ground with his dress blues, his folded flag, and his old beat-up flip phone in his pocket because I couldn't bear the thought of it sitting in a drawer. 8 years since he died on our land. Accidentally, everyone said, like the word could patch over the unease none of us wanted to name. And now he just called me. You don't have much time. He's coming. The logical part of my brain lined up arguments, neat as ammo cans. Numbers get reissued, recordings can be spoofed, grief can play tricks, stress can too. I'd been running on fumes for months, bouncing between deployments and training, rescheduling this trip home 3 times until the lawyer finally said, Captain Carter, we need your signature in person. I'd come back to Cedar Hollow for legal paperwork, closing chapters, signing deeds, sorting boxes. Not this. My gaze slid to the framed photo on the wall. Dad in his younger days, in his navy whites, one arm around Mom, the other holding me as a toddler with a plastic flower clutched in my fist. The glass had a thin layer of dust over it. I hadn't wiped it clean yet. "Okay," I whispered to no one. "Okay." I shoved the phone into my pocket before my fingers could start dialing dead numbers just to hear a recording. I didn't believe in ghosts. I believed in cause and effect, in bad guys and good intel, and the murky space between. But I couldn't shake the feeling of his voice in my ear. He's coming. Who? And why now, 8 years too late? When my mother died, Dad started locking things. Doors, drawers, glove compartments, his face. I was 12. Mom's watch had gone into the coffin with her. Silver, simple, scratched at the edges. I'd argued, wanted to keep it, but Dad had insisted. "She wore it every day," he'd said, thumb brushing the metal. "Goes where she goes." Even then, I'd felt the closing. Not just of the coffin lid, but of rooms in our house. Places I wasn't invited into anymore. He started spending more time in the workshop out back, the one that smelled like oil and sawdust and whatever secrets he was burying under all that noise. After Mom, the land became the third person at our table. He talked more about property lines than people, more about keeping Carter Acres intact than about how either of us were actually doing. "Your granddad fought for this land," he'd say, fingers tapping the edge of his mug. "I fought for a different kind of ground, but it's the same thing. You hold what's yours." I'd nod, but my eyes were always half on the door, on the maps he kept rolled up in the corner, on the keys he slid into his pocket, always in the same order. He kept the world out and us in. Then he died, and all of it, land, house, workshop, became a legal problem to solve. 8 years. I'd kept the memories compartmentalized. 2 wars, 3 duty stations, 15,000 miles between me and Cedar Hollow. It was easier to be Captain Carter than John Carter's daughter. Easier to manage other people's emergencies than walk through the echo of my own. Now I was back. The town hadn't changed much. The gas station still had the same dinged-up pumps. The diner still smelled like bacon grease and coffee. Mr. Hanson still sat on his porch across the road every morning at 0700, feeding birds and pretending not to watch everyone who passed. "Thought you forgot about us," he'd said when I arrived that afternoon, voice like gravel. "Your dad always said you'd outrun this place." "Didn't outrun the paperwork," I'd replied, forced smile tight on my face. He'd studied me. He was different at the end, he'd said. Nervous, jumpy, talking about people coming for the land. I figured it was the pills talking. Then he'd given me a look I couldn't quite read. "You listened to him better than we did, huh?" At the time, I'd brushed it off, chalked it up to small-town gossip and the way grief rewrites the past. But now? Now my dead father had called my living phone from a number buried 6 feet under with him. "You don't have much time. He's coming." A shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the Ohio winter creeping under the door. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair. The fabric was stiff, still smelling faintly of jet fuel from the hop that brought me here. I shrugged it on, zipped it up. My fingers moved automatically, like I was gearing up for patrol. If I was going to make sense of this, there was only one place to start. Not with neighbors, not with lawyers, not with half-remembered conversations. With the ground where we'd left him. The cemetery sat at the edge of town, where the cracked asphalt gave way to gravel, then to dirt. The sky had that flat, heavy look it got before a snow, all color leached out. My breath puffed in short white bursts as I walked between rows of old stones, wreaths and plastic flowers leaning at angles that said nobody had visited in a while. Dad's grave wasn't hard to find. We'd picked the spot together, back when he was still able to walk the ground and joke about staking his final claim. Third row from the big oak tree, left of the Veterans Memorial. The stone was simple. John Michael Carter, beloved husband, father, veteran. He held the line. I crouched, gloved fingers brushing cold marble. A lone, dead flower lay at the base, one of the silk ones Mrs. Callahan liked to put out. The wind tugged at its frayed petals. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. My voice fogged the air in front of the name. You picked a hell of a time to start calling. A part of me expected something cinematic, a gust of wind, a flash of lightning, a whisper in my ear. Instead, all I got was the distant sound of a truck on the highway and the creak of the oak branches overhead. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. No missed calls. No recent calls. His contact sat there, stubbornly unchanged. I hit call before I could talk myself out of it. The line went straight to a recorded message. "The number you have reached is not in service." I let it play out, feeling foolish, feeling angry, feeling something that lived between the two. "Okay," I said, hanging up. "If this is some sick prank, you picked the wrong soldier." I stood, dusted the dirt from my knee, and looked back toward the road. From here, I could see the roof of the family home peeking over the bare winter trees. Just beyond it, the red tin of Dad's workshop, half hidden by the rise of the land. He'd spent more time in that workshop during his last year than anywhere else. Locked in, lights on late. Voices heard through the thin walls when no one was supposed to be there. He's coming. My gaze lingered on the workshop roof. If there were answers, they'd be there. In whatever he'd been building, hiding, guarding. A gust of wind rattled the dead flower at my feet, snapping one of the plastic petals clean off. It tumbled across the grave marker like a tiny, artificial omen. I bent down, picked it up, and slid it into my pocket beside the phone. "Fine," I murmured, eyes on the workshop in the distance. "You want me to listen now, Dad?" "I will." I turned away from the grave, boots crunching on the frosted ground, and started toward the one door he'd always kept locked. The walk from the cemetery to the workshop shouldn't have felt like crossing a border. It was maybe half a mile, down the gravel lane, past the house with its peeling paint and sagging porch, across the stretch of field that used to be corn and now just held patches of frost-tipped grass. The sky was slipping from dull gray to the kind of blue that meant the temperature would drop fast once the sun sunk. My boots crunched over old tire ruts hardened by the freeze. The air smelled like cold earth and distant wood smoke, some neighbor's fireplace working overtime. By the time I reached the workshop, my fingers had gone stiff inside my gloves. The building crouched at the edge of the tree line, a squat rectangle of weathered wood and tin. The red paint on the door had faded to a dull rust. Dad had built this place before I was born. The same year he mustered out of the Navy for good, he'd said, like the sea might try to draft him back if he didn't say it out loud. I'd spent half my childhood trying to peek past that door when it was cracked, catching glimpses of tools, engine parts, maps tacked to the wall. After Mom died, the door stopped cracking. It stayed closed. Locked. I paused in front of it. The padlock he always used, sturdy, old, with a notch on one side from the time he'd dropped it on concrete, hung exactly where it always had. But the dirt in front of the door told a different story. Fresh tracks. Not mine, not Dad's old work boots. 2 sets. One narrow, one wider. Deep enough that they'd been made when the ground was soft. Recent. And tire tracks, too, cutting in from the access road, looping close to the side of the building, then back out.
too clean to be 8-year-old impressions.
The frost had settled into them like a highlight. I crouched, touching the edge of the nearest print. The soil crumbled under my glove with the brittle texture of frozen mud. A faint whiff of gasoline still hung in the air if I leaned close enough. Someone had been here. Not weeks ago. Days. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me flinch. I straightened so fast, my knee popped. The cemetery, the call, the voice, they surged back in one wave. You don't have much time. I yanked the phone out. Unknown number, local area code. My thumb hovered for a half second, then I answered. Captain Carter. Silence. Then a click. A breath. Male. Rough. You really back, Lily? The voice asked. For real this time? Relief washed through me, thin but real. Not Dad. Mr. Hansen. You scared the hell out of me, I said. What do you need, Mr. H? Should be asking you that, he replied. Saw you walking past the cemetery. You headed to the shop? His words sent a chill down my spine. The workshop faced away from the road. He shouldn't have been able to see me from his porch. You spying on me again? I forced a smile into my voice. Been watching that place since your daddy passed, he said, voice lowering. Carl's truck's been by. More than once. The name landed like a stone in my stomach. Carl Murphy. Mom's sister's kid. My cousin in the biological sense, but not in any sense that counted. Always chasing money that didn't belong to him. Last I'd heard, he was 2 states over, running some sketchy investment scheme. He's not supposed to have access, I said. Tell that to his boots, Hansen replied. I'd be careful in there if I was you. Your old man worried about that boy right up till the end. I looked at the fresh tracks again. Did Dad ever tell you why? I asked. The line crackled. For a second, all I heard was the faint whistle of Hansen's breathing. Not straight out, he said finally. But he started carrying that recorder everywhere. Talking into it when he thought nobody could hear. Kept saying he'd leave breadcrumbs for you. The words stuck. Breadcrumbs. I thought of the locked drawers, the maps, the way Dad had stared at the land some evenings like it was both shield and threat. Why didn't you call me sooner? I asked. You were in uniform, Hansen said. Last thing I wanted was to drag you back here for something that might have just been an old man's ghosts. He paused. But if you're standing at that door now, maybe it's time you heard what he couldn't say out loud. A gust of wind pushed at my back, cold fingers slipping under my collar. Maybe it is, I said quietly. I ended the call, slid the phone back into my pocket beside the brittle plastic flower petal from the grave, and turned to the lock. The padlock looked untouched. No scratches, no dust rings, no sign of picking. I reached up to test it, expecting resistance. It swung open in my hand with a soft click. My pulse jumped. Dad never left this unlocked. Not when he was alive. Not even when he was in the hospital. He'd made me promise to lock it after we took his last tool belt inside. He'd rattled the door twice just to make sure. Now, the lock was decorative. Someone had been in here. And either they were sloppy enough not to relock, or they wanted me to walk straight in. I slid the lock off and pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Old oil, sawdust, stale coffee, and something faintly metallic and sour, like rust and damp paper. Dust motes swirled in the thin stripe of light from the door. The workshop looked frozen in time. Pegboard lined with neatly hung tools, workbench cluttered with parts and labeled jars, a battered thermos sitting where he'd always left it, next to an old radio with a dangling antenna. But under the layer of dust, I saw newer disturbances. Footprints. Recent.
crossing the concrete floor, stopping near the workbench, then veering toward the back corner where Dad used to stack lumber.
I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The hinges complained with a low, long creak, then settled. My eyes adjusted slowly. I moved the way I learned to move in buildings downrange, deliberate, scanning, noting exits and oddities. On the workbench, one object stood out. A small black rectangle out of place among Dad's analog clutter. A recorder. Not the cheap kind from discount stores. A sturdy, professional digital voice recorder, scuffed at the edges, battery cover taped. I reached for it, pulse ticking higher. A yellow sticky note clung to the back, curling at the corners. Dad's handwriting sprawled across it, blocky, slightly shaky but unmistakable. For Lily. My throat closed around his name like a fist. For a second, all the air in the workshop felt too thick to breathe. The silence pressed on my ears. Outside, a crow called once, harsh and distant. I peeled the note off gently, folded it, and slipped it into my pocket next to the plastic flower petal, feeling the paper's soft drag against my fingers. The recorder weighed more than it should have in my hand. I flipped it over. The battery indicator blinked half full. Someone had changed them recently. Dad didn't leave this fully charged for 8 years. I pressed play. Static, low at first, then the click of the internal mic adjusting. Then his voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, Lil, I guess I didn't get to tell you everything face to face. I pressed my free hand flat against the workbench. The wood felt rough under my palm, familiar. I'm not crazy, he continued. You remember that when they start saying I was. I know what I saw. I know what they're after. Paper rustled in the background of the recording. A chair scraped. He sighed, the sound old and tired and full of something like shame. I kept you out of it, he said. Hell, I kept you out of everything. Thought if I carried it all, you wouldn't have to. That was my mistake. I swallowed hard, staring at the wall of tools without really seeing them. The land isn't just dirt and trees, he said. It's what's under it. Your granddad didn't talk about it much. Thought if he stayed small and quiet, no one would notice. But the surveyors did. So did the companies sniffing around. Surveyors. Companies. Mineral rights. Pieces clicked in my head I didn't know I'd been holding. There's a seam out there, he said. Mineral. Valuable. I told them no, over and over. They smiled, they called me neighbor and friend and partner, until they didn't. A pause. A soft clink, like a bottle being set down. That boy, Carl, Dad said, voice tightening. I loved him 'cause he was your mama's blood. I tried to help, but dead'll hollow a man out. They got to him easy. Promised him a piece if he could talk me into signing. I pictured Carl's smirk, the one he wore whenever he talked about opportunities and investments. The way Dad's shoulders had stiffened the last Thanksgiving we'd all been together under this roof. When Carl had started talking too casually about selling unused land. I told him no, Dad said. He kept coming back. Brings men with him now, suits and boots. They walk my property like it's already theirs. The edges of his voice frayed into something I'd never heard from him alive. Fear. If anything happens to me, he said, it wasn't an accident. You remember that. I didn't just trip. I didn't just fall. And if they tell you I got confused, you tell them you know better. Static crackled. A thump. The shifting sound of someone moving closer to the mic. I left everything you need in the box, he said. You know the one. Your mama's watch, the deeds, the letters. The watch. I closed my eyes for a second. The silver band around Mom's paper wrist in the coffin. The way Dad had insisted it go with her. The way he'd held my hand so tight my fingers went numb. We buried her with it, I whispered.
On the recorder, Dad's breath hitched.
You think I put all my eggs in one basket, sweetheart? I might be old, but I ain't stupid. He laughed once, a short, humorless sound. Box is under my feet, he said. Under this very floor. If they're listening, they'll tear this place apart. So I hit it one layer deeper.
A sharp knock sounded in the background of the recording, making me flinch.
Gotta go.
His voice dropped to a hurried whisper.
You don't have much time.
The same words he'd said on the call.
He's coming.
The recorder clicked off. The workshop seemed to pulse around me, every shadow sharper, every creak louder. Under his feet. I looked down at the concrete floor. No obvious hatch, no trap door. Just oil stains and old scuffs, and the faint outlines of boards where he'd poured unevenly. I moved around the workbench, boots echoing in the enclosed space. If this had been a structure search overseas, I'd have slapped the floor with a boot heel, listening for hollow spots. So I did. Slowly, methodically, I tapped my heel across the concrete. Solid. 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 Hollow. A sharp, unmistakable change in tone, right near the back corner where the new footprints clustered. I crouched, running my gloved hand across the seam I hadn't noticed before. A faint hairline crack in the concrete, tracing a square about 3 feet by 3. He had sealed something in. I looked up at the pegboard, scanning quickly. Pry bar, crowbar, mallet. Old habits kicked in. I picked the right tools without thinking, feeling the familiar weight settle into my hands. As I wedged the bar into the crack, metal scraping against concrete with a nasty, grating screech, my phone buzzed again in my pocket. I froze, heart leaping into my throat. The crowbar hung half embedded in the floor, my breath misting the cold air. I fumbled for the phone with my free hand, eyes never leaving the hollow square. Unknown number. No name. I answered, pulse pounding. Lily Carter. Static again. Higher, sharper this time.
Then a voice I didn't recognize, low and tight. You should have stayed gone, it said. Last warning. The line went dead. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. Someone was watching. Someone knew I was in this workshop. Someone did not want me to open that floor. Dad's words overlapped the strangers in my head. You don't have much time. He's coming. I slid the phone back into my pocket, wrapped both hands around the crowbar, and braced my feet. If Carl, or whoever was pulling his strings, thought threatening calls and ghost numbers were going to scare me off from what my father clearly died trying to protect, then they didn't know me at all. Or they'd forgotten what kind of daughter he'd raised. I took a breath, muscles coiling. And then I pulled. The crowbar bit into the crack with a stubborn grind, metal catching on concrete. My shoulders burned as I leaned my weight into it, boots squeaking on the dusty floor. The sound, a long, tearing screech, echoed off the walls like something protesting from underneath. The slab shifted. Not much. Just enough for a thin line of darker shadow to appear along one edge. Cold air seeped up, brushing my face. It smelled different from the rest of the workshop, damp, stale, like closed-up earth and old paper. I worked the bar around one corner, then the next, each movement sending a shudder up my arms. Sweat collected at the back of my neck despite the chill. Bits of concrete flaked off under my gloves, rough and gritty. Finally, with a sharp crack, one edge broke free. I squatted, hooked my fingers under the lip, and lifted. The concrete panel rose heavier than it looked, my muscles shaking by the time I propped it against the wall. Underneath, a shallow cavity yawned, a roughly cut square in the earth, maybe 2 feet deep. Inside sat a box.
It wasn't flashy. Just an old military ammo can, olive drab paint chipped, stenciled lettering half worn away. The steel handle lay flat against the lid,
cold and slightly rusted when I gripped it. I hauled it up, the weight pulling against my fingers, the metal scraping my gloves. Dirt clung to the bottom in crumbling clumps. I set it on the workbench and just stood there a second, breathing hard, listening. The workshop was silent except for the faint ticking of the cooling concrete and the soft buzz of the overhead light. No footsteps outside, no vehicles, no phantom phone rings. Just me and the box my father had hidden under his feet. I flipped the latches. They snapped open with two sharp pops, loud in the enclosed space. The lid stuck for a heartbeat, then gave way with a rusty squeal. Inside, everything was wrapped in layers of plastic and cloth, like he'd been expecting a flood. I peeled back the top layer. On top, neat, deliberate, lay my mother's watch. I froze. It was exactly as I remembered. Silver band, oval face, tiny scratch at the 4 o'clock mark from when she'd dropped it on the driveway years ago. The second hand ticked, slow and steady, as if time hadn't noticed the 8 years between her funeral and this moment. "We buried this with you," I whispered, fingers hovering over the cool metal. My mind backed up. Coffin, funeral, the watch on her wrist, Dad's hand shaking as he adjusted the sleeve. Had I actually watched them close the lid with it on? Or had I just told myself that's what happened because that's what he said he would do? Either he'd lied, or he'd swapped it. The cold metal of the band kissed my gloves when I finally lifted it. The watch felt lighter than it had in my memory, but solid, real. I slid it gently around my wrist. The metal was icy against my skin, sending a small shock up my arm. Underneath the watch lay file folders, their edges wavy from age and humidity, but meticulously labeled in his blocky handwriting. Carter Land, original deeds, survey maps, 1973-1998, Murphy correspondence. The last one sent a fresh spike of anger through me. I pulled it out. The paper inside rasped as I flipped through, a tactile scrape that matched the rising roughness in my chest. Letters, contracts, poorly formatted loan agreements with Carl's signature scrawled in sloppy loops. Copies of emails printed out in case the digital ones conveniently disappeared. Each one a different flavor of pressure. "Uncle John, you know I'd never do anything to hurt the family, but if we don't move on this land, someone else will. Partners are waiting. This is our shot." My father's notes lined the margins in red pen. "No, not signing. Liar." I found another folder at the bottom. Legal, contingency. Inside, a copy of his will, earlier than the one I'd signed at the lawyer's that morning. Handwritten addendums, sticky notes. One line circled 3 times. "If death not clear accidental, contact Sheriff Dalton directly. Give him everything." My thumb brushed the ink, the paper soft under the pressure. Dalton had been a deputy when I left. Quiet but steady, the kind of cop who actually listened more than he talked. Dad had trusted him. Under the folders, tucked into a corner, lay a small flash drive taped to an envelope. The tape crackled when I peeled it off. On the envelope, my name again. Lily, final statement. My fingers went numb around the edges. I slid it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. The creases were deep, like he'd reread it or second-guessed it before tucking it away. I unfolded it. "Lil," it began. No dear, no captain, just Lil, the way he'd said it on good days. "If you're reading this, I didn't get to watch you come up the driveway one more time. I hope you stayed far away. I'm sorry you didn't." My vision blurred for half a heartbeat. I blinked it clear. "You think I didn't know I was shutting you out?" he wrote. "I did. I thought the less you knew, the less they could use you. Turns out I just left you in the dark with the monsters."
The word monsters sat thick on the page.
I've been getting messages, he continued. Threats. Calls from numbers that don't exist. People telling me exactly how easy it would be to make an old Navy vet slip, fall, not wake up. I started recording everything. Some on that device, some on the old phone.
My skin prickled. The old phone. The one buried with him.
They'll say I was paranoid, he wrote. Maybe I am. But even paranoid people get murdered, Lil. Don't let them make you feel crazy for looking at the evidence. His handwriting got shakier near the end. I don't know who he will be when this reaches you, he wrote. Might be Carl, might be someone with cleaner shoes. But he's coming. For the land, for the paper. Maybe for you.
My gut clenched.
Don't fight him alone, he finished. Call Dalton. Trust him. And for once in your life, don't try to win the war without backup. Dad's signature sprawled across the bottom, big, defiant, ink pressed hard enough to indent the page. My hand shook. Just enough for the paper to flutter. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope, then into my jacket inner pocket, right over my heart. The air in the workshop suddenly felt too thin. I grabbed the recorder again. There were more files on it, a list scrolling across the small screen. Dates, times, clipped titles. Murphy visit, April. Call, unknown, 555-0199. Note on truck, 3 a.m. Dalton meeting. I could have sat there for hours, listening to my father narrate his slow slide into fear. I could have traced every call, every threat, every visit. But his words from earlier nudged at me. You don't have much time. I needed an ally, not just in memory, in real time. Sheriff Dalton. I packed the most important pieces into my bag. The flash drive, the Murphy folder, the original deeds, the contingency line, the recorder. The watch stayed on my wrist, its band slowly warming against my skin. I left the ammo can where it sat on the bench, lid closed but not latched. If someone broke in, I wanted them to see an empty shell, not everything I carried. As I stepped outside, the late afternoon light had thinned to a hazy blue. The air bit harder now, wind cutting across the open field. The workshop door groaned behind me as I pulled it shut, the padlock hanging in my hand. I looked at it for a second. If I locked it, I'd know if someone broke in again. If I didn't, they'd think I hadn't found anything. I slipped it through the latch but didn't click it closed, leaving it to hang just so, like a prop in a play. A car engine turned over in the distance. I tensed, scanning. An old pickup rumbled past on the road, not slowing. A dog barked twice and went quiet. I started back toward the house, boots crunching. The phone in my pocket felt like it weighed 5 pounds. Halfway across the field, it buzzed. I stopped dead. The vibration thrummed against my leg. Same pattern as before. Same weight. Same coil of dread behind my ribs. I pulled it out. No number this time. No unknown caller ID. Just 3 words on the cracked screen glowing in a new text. From Dad. Don't trust cousin. The text sat on my screen, small and brutal. From Dad. Don't trust cousin. The letters were too clean, too ordinary for how wrong they felt. A wind gust pushed across the field, slicing through my coat. The dead grass rattled around my boots. Far off, a dog barked once and then cut off mid-howl, like even it decided this was a bad time. My thumb hovered, waiting for the sender details to load. No number, no thread history, just that one line floating on an empty screen. I tried to call back. The message vanished, just like the call log at the house. One blink and it was gone, leaving nothing but the ache in my chest, and the imprint of the words behind my eyes. Dead fathers don't text, Lily. I knew that. Phones get spoofed. Numbers get rerouted. Systems glitch. I've been in enough ops to see enemies use tech and superstition together, one to scare people, one to track them. But whoever thought it would rattle me didn't understand the difference between fear and focus. If Dad told me not to trust Carl, that just confirmed what every real piece of evidence already screamed. I slid the phone back into my pocket, next to Mom's plastic flower petal, the brittle edge scratching my knuckles. My other wrist felt the steady weight of her watch ticking out seconds I suddenly wanted to use carefully. I picked up my pace. By the time I reached the house, the sky had faded into a dull navy. The porch light flicked on, automatic sensor still doing its job. It cast a weak circle of yellow over the warped boards and the chipped paint, turning the windblown leaves into dark, twitching shapes at the edges. I stepped inside long enough to grab my car keys, the recorder, and the box folders I'd prepped. The house smelled like old wood and Mrs. Callahan's soup, the faint onion garlic scent drifting from the covered pot on the counter. I paused only once, hand on the back door, looking at the outline of the workshop through the kitchen window. Just a darker rectangle against the darker trees. Somewhere between that box and this kitchen, I'd crossed a line. Dad had left breadcrumbs. Someone else had left threats. I wasn't going to sit in the middle and wait for either side to make the next move. Sheriff first. Everything else later. The Cedar Hollow Sheriff's Office sat on Main Street between the post office and the barber shop, as if law and order were just another errand. The fluorescent lights inside glowed too bright against the early dark, turning the windows into flat, pale rectangles. I pulled into the lot, gravel crunching under my tires, and killed the engine. The air inside the car cooled quickly. My breath fogged the windshield for a second before I wiped it away with my sleeve. The building smelled like coffee and printer toner when I stepped in. A bell over the door gave a half-hearted ding, a sound more tired than welcoming. A deputy at the front desk looked up. New face, young, clean uniform, nervous eyes. "Evening, ma'am," he said. "Something I can help you with?" "Captain Lily Carter," I said, tugging my glove off so I could flip my ID. "Here to see Sheriff Dalton." His eyebrows climbed. "Carter, as in—" "John's daughter," I supplied. Recognition hit quickly, followed by a flicker of unease. "Right, okay, he's in the back. I'll let him know you're here." He disappeared through a door, leaving me with a row of metal chairs and a bulletin board covered in flyers, lost dogs, bake sales, a faded poster about opioid awareness. My fingers drummed against the folders I held. The recorder sat in my coat pocket, a rectangular weight against my ribs, as if my father's voice was literally pressing against my heart. The door swung open again. Dalton stepped out, a little grayer than I remembered, but still solid. He'd traded the deputy's badge for sheriff stars since I left, but his eyes were the same. Clear, steady, the kind that took in everything and handed back only what you needed. "Captain Carter," he said. "I'll be damned. You actually came back." "Lawyer needed ink," I said. "And my father seems to be making phone calls." His brows knit. "Come on back." His office was small, cluttered in that organized way, files stacked in careful piles, a half-drunk mug of coffee leaving a ring on a coaster, a photo of a Little League team on the wall. He closed the door behind us with a soft thud, then leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Okay," he said. "Start from the top." I didn't dramatize it. I didn't have to. The call from Dad's number at the house, the voice, the exact words, the workshop, the fresh tracks, the loose lock, the recorder with Dad's confession, the ammo box under the floor, the watch, the letters, the flash drive, the text, "Don't trust cousin," from a non-existent thread. Dalton didn't interrupt much. When he did, it was to clarify dates, times. Who might have access? Carl's been around? I asked when I finished. Dalton let out a slow breath through his nose. He's been sniffing, he said. Showed up at my office twice last year, fishing about mineral rights, asking what might happen if you never came home to claim anything. I told him that's not how law works. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, stubble rasping. He started dropping by your place more after that. Thought I didn't notice. You think he was trying to scare Dad? I asked. He met my gaze. I think he was trying to make your father sign something he'd regret. And I think when that didn't work, he got desperate. I slid the Murphy folder across the desk. The papers fanned slightly. These are copies of his attempts, I said. Contracts, letters. Dad labeled them. He even wrote liar in the margins, which feels on brand. Dalton's mouth twitched, then flattened again as he flipped through. Well, hell, he muttered. These loan agreements alone, if we can tie them to whoever was dangling money in front of Carl, we've got conspiracy written all over it. I pulled out the contingency page from Dad's will. The line about contacting Dalton if his death wasn't clearly accidental. He wrote your name, I said. Trusted you. Something in his eyes softened, then hardened. He came by last year before he passed. Told me he was uneasy, wouldn't say more. I asked him if he wanted to file anything formal. He said no. Not yet, he told me. Not until Lily comes home. My throat tightened. And then he didn't make it that far, I said. Dalton nodded once. Found him by the creek. Slipped, hit his head on a rock. At least, that's what the scene looked like. No sign of a struggle. No sign of forced anything. But his eyes. He looked past me for a moment, remembering. There was fear there, he said. Like the last thing he saw wasn't the water. He closed the folder. You know, your dad called me twice the week before he died, he added. Didn't pick up fast enough either time. Voicemail was just static. I wrote it off as old phone trouble. Static. Calls that register as nothing. My fingers brushed the recorder in my pocket. Do you still have them? I asked. He shook his head. Voicemail system auto-deletes after 30 days. Policy I regret now. Always the small, bureaucratic efficiencies that erased what mattered. I need you to hear something, I said. I set the recorder on his desk and pressed play on the message labeled Murphy Visit, April. Dad's voice filled the office, tinny but clear. Get off my land, Carl. I'm not signing a damn thing. You bring those men here again, I'll have Dalton on you so fast you won't know what county you're in. Then Carl's voice, my cousin, cut through, sharper, smugger. You can't keep this forever, Uncle John. You're old. Lily's never here. Someone's gonna get it. Might as well be family. The recording captured a scuffle, the thud of a shoulder hitting a doorframe, heavy breathing. Let go of me, Dad growled. Silence. Then footsteps receding. The clip ended. Dalton exhaled slowly, lips pressed thin. That's enough for harassment, trespassing, maybe even attempted extortion. Coupled with the contracts, he looked at me. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is criminal. The call, I said. The text. Could Carl be using Dad's old number somehow? Dalton frowned. We buried that phone with him. But you know as well as I do, numbers get reassigned, systems get spoofed. If someone wants to mess with you, they'll pick the one thing that hits deepest. His gaze held mine. Doesn't mean there's anything supernatural about it. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I didn't think you'd say ghost. I'm too busy writing reports to believe in ghosts, he said.
But I believe in people doing ugly things to get what they want. And I believe your father believed he was in danger. He tapped the recorder. And now we've got his words saying so. He slid the flash drive toward himself.
What's on this? More of the same, I said. He mentioned calls from numbers that don't exist. Logs might still be retrievable if someone knows where to look. He nodded. I'll get our tech with state support on it. Meanwhile, he leaned forward, voice dropping. You don't answer unknown numbers alone. You record everything. You don't move around town without telling me. I almost laughed. Sheriff, with respect, I've been blown at overseas. I can handle my cousin and whoever's holding his leash. I'm sure you can, he said. But your dad asked me to be your backup. And for once, I'd like you not to Carter your way out of help. I couldn't argue with that. Fine, I said. You're in. Dalton pushed back from the desk. I'm opening an official investigation. Cause to review your father's death, potential fraud, conspiracy to commit land theft. Carl's name's all over this. He's been living out near the county line. I'll have someone bring him in for questioning. Don't warn him too early, I said. If he's half as scared as Dad thought he'd be, he'll run. Dalton's mouth curled in a grim smile. And if he runs, he's just given us one more thing to add to the report. He stood, grabbing his hat. You heading back to the house? Yeah, I said. There's more in that workshop I haven't listened to yet. Lock the doors, he said. Both house and shop. I'll have a patrol swing by more often. As I stepped back out into the night, the temperature had dropped again. My breath came out in thicker clouds, the air carrying that frozen stillness that makes every sound carry further. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stopped on the sidewalk, under the orange wash of the street lamp, and pulled it out. New voicemail. No missed call. I opened it, thumb shaking just enough to hit the wrong icon the first time. The message started with static, harsh, crackling, like the recorder when Dad first started talking. Then underneath, faint but unmistakable, his voice again. Good girl, he said. You found it. Then layered over his words, another sound. Dull, rhythmic, growing louder. Footsteps on gravel. Not on the recording. Outside, in real time. I turned slowly toward the dark shape of my car at the edge of the lot. A shadow detached itself from the alley beside the sheriff's office, cigarette tip glowing briefly, then dying as it was flicked to the ground. The figure stepped closer just enough for the streetlight to catch his face. Carl. Carl's face slid into the light like something peeled off the underside of a rock. He'd put on weight since I'd last seen him, but not in a way that softened him. His features were sharper, eyes sunk a little deeper. Expensive jacket, cheap cologne, too strong, cutting through the cold with a chemical sweetness that turned my stomach. Well, I'll be damned, he said, hands spread like he was greeting a long-lost friend. If it isn't Captain Lilly, back from conquering the world. The urge to reach for a weapon I didn't have on me flared and faded. This was Ohio, not Afghanistan. The only thing I had on my hip was a phone with dead man's messages on it. I kept my voice flat. Carl? He flicked ash from the cigarette he'd just dropped, grinding it under his heel. The ember smeared red across the sidewalk before going dark. Heard you were in town, he continued, stepping closer. His boots crunched on the grit at the curb. Figured I'd say hello before you ran off again. Streetlights cast long shadows, his stretching across the pavement toward me. I took half a step back, enough to break it before it reached my shoes. Small town, I said. Word travels. Especially when the sheriff's office door's swinging like a saloon, he said. Dalton must really like you, dragging you in after hours. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My phone was still in my hand. My thumb, almost on its own, slid up and tapped the voice recorder app. A small red dot glowed on the corner of the screen. "What do you want, Carl?" I asked. He spread his hands again, palms out. "What, a man can't say hi to his favorite cousin? Your dad always said you were the suspicious type." "My dad said a lot of things," I replied. "About you, too." The smile cracked harder at the edges. "Look," he said, dropping his voice, glancing toward the sheriff's office door. "We don't have to make this messy. You're here, finally. We can fix everything in an afternoon." "You mean you can get what you've been circling for 8 years," I said. "The land." He laughed once, forced. "It's not just land anymore, Lily. There's value under your feet. I'm trying to help you realize that. You and Uncle John both could have been set up for life if he just signed when the deals were good." "Deals that went through you," I said, "with your cut baked in." He shrugged, unbothered. "Finder's fee. I put the work in, knocked on doors, met the right people. What's wrong with wanting us all to eat?" The way he said us made my skin crawl. "You pushed him," I said, "over and over. Brought men out to the property, pressured him when he was alone." He looked genuinely surprised for a second, then recovered. "He talk about that on one of his little tapes?" I kept my face neutral. "He talked." Carl's jaw tightened. Just a flick, there and gone. "He was getting paranoid," he said, talking to himself, muttering about enemies. You know how old vets get. Mind starts fighting wars that are over. "He wasn't confused when he wrote your name on every folder," I said, "or when he wrote liar in the margins." The wind picked up, carrying a faint whiff of exhaust from a car turning onto Main Street. Somewhere, a church bell chimed the hour, thin and distant. Carl stepped closer. Too close. His breath smelled like cigarettes and cheap coffee. "Whatever he told you," he said, voice low, "you've been gone a long time. You don't know what this town is anymore. You don't know who owns what." "People have expectations. People like Barren Minerals?" I asked. "Or whatever shell company's been dangling you?" His eyes flicked away, then back. "You've been reading old man's mail." "His land," I said. "My land now." He smiled again, but I saw the strain behind it. "You can't hold this alone, Lily," he said. "You're Army. You'll get shipped out again. Eventually, you'll want to sell. Why go through all that when you could sign now, let me smooth it over, and walk away with a clean conscience?" "Clean," I repeated. "That's one word for it." He leaned in, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Accidents happen on isolated property," he said. "You know that better than most." The cold didn't reach my face now. Heat rose instead, tight and controlled. "You threatening me, Carl?" I asked, still calm. He straightened immediately, hands up like I'd pulled a weapon. "Just saying things happen. I don't want you on the wrong side of it. We're blood, remember?" Blood. Like it was a promise, not a warning. My phone buzzed in my hand. We both looked down. The screen flashed with a new notification. "Unknown. Check your voicemail." The timing was too perfect. Carl's eyes narrowed. "You working with Dalton now? He feeding you scare tactics?" I met his stare. "If anyone here knows about scare tactics, it's you." For a moment, the mask slipped completely. His mouth twisted, his eyes flat cold. "Last chance, Lil," he said softly. "Sign, sell, and walk. Or stand on principle and get buried with the rest of them." Before I could answer, the sheriff's office door creaked open behind me. Dalton stepped out, hat in hand, expression unreadable.
The deputy lingered in the doorway, watching. "Evening, Carl," Dalton said. "Didn't expect to see you loitering around my building." Carl's smile snapped back on like a light. "Just catching up with family, Sheriff. You know how it is. Holidays coming and all." Dalton's gaze flicked to me, then back to Carl. "We'll be in touch soon. Officially. Probably best you don't hang around here after dark. People might get the wrong idea." Carl held up his hands. "Wouldn't dream of disrespecting the badge." He looked at me one more time. "Think about what I said, Lily. Don't let a dead man's paranoia run your life." He turned and walked away, boots crunching on the gravel, shoulders stiff. He didn't look back. Dalton waited until Carl's taillights disappeared down the street before speaking. "You recording?" he asked. I held up my phone, the red dot still glowing. "Every word." "Good," he said. "We'll add that to the file." He glanced at my screen as another notification popped up. New voicemail. No call. "That the one you mentioned?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Came in right before you stepped out." "Don't listen to it alone," he said. "Go home, lock up. I'll send a copy of what we've got so far to the state investigator tonight." He hesitated, then added, "You need a place in town that isn't your house? You call me. Workshop's too exposed." "I'll be fine," I said automatically. He raised an eyebrow. "I'll call," I amended. He nodded, satisfied for now. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, this starts moving." The drive back to the house felt longer than it should have. The two-lane road cut through dark, empty fields, my headlights slicing open a narrow cone of visibility. Every reflective road sign flashed and vanished. The dashboard clock glowed a soft green. The voicemail notification hovered on the edge of my vision, a small icon and a number 1. When I pulled into the gravel drive, the house sat dark except for the porch light. The workshop was a blacker patch of shadow against the tree line. I killed the engine. The sudden quiet rang in my ears. For a moment, I just sat there, fingers wrapped around the wheel. The air inside the car cooled quickly, smelling faintly of old fabric and the takeaway coffee cup I'd abandoned earlier. I pulled my phone out. The urge to toss it onto the passenger seat and pretend none of this was happening was strong. Instead, I tapped the voicemail. The speakers crackled. Static again, familiar, thick, like the recorder. Then a layering like two sounds at once, wind and something else. My father's voice came through, clearer this time. "Lily," he said, "if you're hearing this, it means he's getting bolder." I swallowed. "They'll try to scare you," he continued. "Use my voice, my number. Use your memories. Don't let them chase you off the land." In the background, I heard another sound. A tap. Then another. Rhythmic. Metallic. Like someone knocking on a hollow surface. The voicemail cut abruptly, replaced by the automated system. End of message. I replayed the last few seconds, turning the volume up. The tapping was there again. 2 beats, pause, 2 beats. A pattern. I looked out the windshield toward the house. 2 porch steps. Pause. 2 more. The hairs on the back of my neck lifted. I ended the voicemail and shoved the phone into my pocket, then got out of the car, boots crunching the gravel. The night air wrapped around me, cold and sharp. The porch light hummed faintly, casting a small pool of yellow on the front steps. I took the stairs quickly. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2. My brain matching the pattern whether I wanted it to or not. Inside, the house was cooler than before. The silence felt heavier. I locked the door behind me, the deadbolt sliding with a satisfying clack. Then I checked the windows, the back door, every latch. Old house, old locks, but they'd have to do.
The kitchen clock ticked loudly. The soup on the stove had cooled, a thin skin forming over the top. I wasn't hungry anymore. I set my folders and the recorder on the table, lined everything up in neat rows. Years of army habit made order feel like armor. Then I noticed it. A small smear on the back door glass. At first, I thought it was dirt. Then I stepped closer. Not dirt. Grease. From fingers. 4 parallel lines, smudged from outside in, like someone had pressed their hand against the glass and slid it down slowly. My heart hammered once, hard enough to make my vision sharpen. I moved closer, breath fogging the pain. The grease streaks caught the overhead light, faintly shining. At the very bottom of the smears, just above the lock, someone had written a single word with a fingertip. Soon. I stared at it, my own reflection staring back over the letters, eyes dark, jaw tight. Behind me, on the table, my father's recorder blinked once, its tiny light pulsing like a heartbeat. I pulled my phone out, snapped a photo of the door, then another of the smear up close. Then I grabbed a dish towel and wiped "soon" off the glass in one hard motion. You had your warning, I muttered, to the door, to the dark outside, to the cousin who thought he could turn fear into leverage. I turned back to the table, picked up the recorder and set it directly in front of me. All right, Dad, I said under my breath. Let's hear the rest. I hit play. The recorder felt small in my hand, but heavier than anything in the room. I sat at the kitchen table, the wood scarred by years of coffee mugs and forgotten plates. The overhead light hummed faintly, casting a pale circle on the table surface. Beyond that circle, the rest of the house faded into soft shadow. Hallway to my left, living room behind me, back door with its freshly wiped glass to my right. The grease smear was gone. The word "soon" still burned in my mind. I pressed play. A soft click. Then my father's voice, closer this time, like he'd leaned in toward the mic. Test. All right. Lily, this one's after the visit from Dalton. Figured I should put things plain. I could hear the scrape of a chair, the clink of glass on wood. It weirdly mirrored my own posture at the table. He thinks I should press charges, Dad continued. Carl's been out here 3 times this week. Brought a man with him today. Tall, city kind, shoes too clean for this dirt. Didn't give a name, just smiled like he already owned the place. A faint, muffled voice bled into the recording, unintelligible, but the cadence was wrong for Dad. Higher, smoother. We're not the bad guys, Mr. Carter, my father mimicked. Bitterness edged into the words. We're just trying to help you unlock value. Your veteran status means you deserve a comfortable retirement. He snorted, a sharp, derisive sound. What I deserve, he said, is to not be bullied off the ground my family broke their backs over. I found myself nodding, even though he couldn't see me. Dalton said we could get a restraining order, Dad went on. But paper won't stop someone who's already decided the rules don't apply. So I'm making my own safeguards. There was a rustle of more papers, the faint squeak of a marker on a surface. I changed the deed access, he said. Moved copies to the safety deposit, marked everything else for you. If they get to me before I get to you, you'll have what you need. The words landed like cold stones in my stomach. He'd truly expected they might get to him. And if they start bothering you... His voice faltered, then steadied. I know you. You'll dig your heels in. Don't. Not alone. Call Dalton. Call your CO if you have to. I'd rather see you mad at me for overreacting than see your name on a stone. Silence stretched for a few seconds. I could hear his breathing, slow and labored. Then a knock echoed in the background of the recording. Sharp, 3 times in quick succession. My pulse jumped, my eyes reflexively flicking to the actual front door, like the sound had come from here instead of 8 years ago. Damn, Dad muttered on the recording, chair scraping.
That'll be him again. He must have set the recorder down and forgotten to turn it off. Footsteps. The creak of the hallway floorboard near the entry. The muted rattle of the deadbolt. The door opened. I heard my father's voice from further away.
Faint but clear. I told you, no more visits. Then a different voice answered. This time I caught it. Carl's. You keep talking like that, he said. People will think you got something to hide, Uncle John. I got plenty to hide, Dad shot back. From you. The conversation drifted in and out as they moved, but the recorder picked up enough. You can't hold out forever, Carl said. You're not getting any younger. The bank notices that. So do your buddies in uniform. Banks and uniforms don't scare me, Dad replied. People who bring strangers to my door do. You think Dalton's gonna camp out here? Carl scoffed. He's got his own problems. He'll file your complaints in the old man yelling at clouds drawer. I filed something else, Dad said. In case you were wondering. Won't be my word against yours. The pause that followed was thick. What did you do? Carl asked, suspicion sharpening his tone. That's none of your business, Dad said. Now get off my porch. A heavy step, like someone closing distance. I'm trying to help you, Carl said, voice tightening. You think people like the ones I work with like hearing no? I'm not your shield, Dad replied. You want to owe sharks money? You pay them yourself. Don't sell my daughter's land to buy yourself a lifeboat. The volume dipped. Maybe he turned away, maybe they moved. But then one sentence rang out clear. The last thing Carl said before the clip dissolved into muffled argument and finally clicked off. Dead men don't own land, Uncle, Carl said. Remember that. The recording stopped abruptly, like someone had hit a wall. I sat still, the house pressing in around me. Dead men don't own land. Outside the sheriff's office, he'd said something close. Stand on principle and get buried with the rest of them. Same sentiment, same casual cruelty braided with threat. I rewound, listening to that last line again, filing the cadence away in my mind. In court, if we got that far, words like that would matter. I scrolled through the remaining files. One was labeled Dalton Meeting. Another, Call, Unknown. Another simply, Accident? I hesitated over that last one, the question mark jagged, like he'd scrawled it in anger. I tapped it. Static, wind, the distant rush of water. Then my father's voice, hoarser, weaker. I walked down to the creek after they left. He said, needed to clear my head. The rocks are slicker than they used to be. I see how easy it would be now. A slip, a push, one good crack on the skull and nobody asks why an old man fell. I gripped the table edge. There were footprints, he continued. Boots I don't recognize. Fresh tracks by the bank, like someone came close and then doubled back. Watching. He drew in a ragged breath that the recorder picked up in too much detail. I'm not scared of dying, he said. I've seen enough of it to know it's coming for all of us. I'm scared of what they'll do to this land if I go on their terms. A pause. A soft thud of something hitting wood. Maybe his hand, maybe a cup. Lily, if you end up hearing this, he said, don't let my last years make you think I lost my mind. I saw what I saw. I heard what I heard. If I slip, if I drown, if they say I just got old. His voice roughened. You question it. You look under everything. Don't let my story end in someone else's profit column. The recording clicked off. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The house exhaled. I realized my hands were shaking. Not badly, just enough that the metal band of Mom's watch trembled faintly against my skin. I pressed stop and set the recorder down. There was no longer any line in my mind between suspicion and certainty. This wasn't random harassment. This wasn't family drama. This was pressure, threats, and a man who knew exactly how easily his accident could be staged. And now they were escalating again, from him to me. My phone buzzed again. For half a second I thought, if it's Dad again, I'm throwing this thing in the creek myself. It wasn't a call. It was a text. Number blocked. Message simple. Leave the box. Leave town. A second later, another joined it. This one with a photo. I opened it. The image glowed on my screen, grainy in the low light, but unmistakable. The workshop, its door, the padlock hanging exactly as I'd left it. Tonight's sky. Someone was outside my father's workshop right now, close enough to snap a picture and send it to me in real time. A hot, controlled anger flared under my sternum. You want to play games on my land? Fine. I hit the share icon and forwarded the image directly to Dalton with 2 words: live now. The 3 little dots of his reply appeared almost immediately. On my way. Stay inside. Stay inside. The advice was sound, tactical, human. My instinct was the opposite. Years of training screamed at me not to cede initiative, to control ground, to set the terms, not accept them. But I wasn't overseas. I was on home soil, tangled in laws and jurisdictions and ghosts. I took a steadying breath. Porch light on, doors locked, sheriff en route. I could give him 5 minutes. The kitchen suddenly felt too open, too many windows, too much glass. I moved into the hallway, flicked off the living room light so I could see more of the outside in reflection, and peered through the thin curtain by the front window. The yard lay quiet. My car sat dark. The workshop in the distance was just a silhouette, no movement around it that I could see from here. Headlights appeared at the far end of the lane. One set, then another. Dalton's cruiser. And behind it, another vehicle's lights. Taller, brighter. The shape wrong for a second squad car. My phone buzzed again. Dalton this time. Got a unit coming to your place, he said when I answered. His voice was tighter now. I'm peeling off to the workshop. You stay put till my deputy knocks. No exceptions. Whose car is behind you? I asked. He swore softly. Didn't think you'd see that. That's Carl. He tailed me out of town. Thought he was being slick. He's headed for the workshop, I said. Yeah, Dalton replied, which means I might finally catch him somewhere he can't pretend he was just stopping by. He paused, then added, Lock your doors, Lily. If he doesn't like how this goes, he might swing by the house after. The line crackled, then cleared. And if he does? I asked. Then keep that recorder handy, Dalton said. And remember, you're not alone in this anymore. He hung up. Outside, the first set of headlights turned toward the workshop, bouncing over the ruts. The second kept going a few yards, paused like the driver was deciding whether to follow, then cut across the field instead, aiming not at the workshop, but straight at the house. The hair on my arms rose. I stepped away from the window. In my pocket, my father's watch ticked against my pulse. At the back of the house, the faint sound of a car door opening carried through the night. Then, 2 soft knocks on the side door. Not the front. Not the porch. The side door that opened straight into the dark hallway between the kitchen and the stairs. Lily? A voice called, muffled but unmistakable. Too sweet. Carl. Open up, he said. We need to talk before anybody else gets in the way. The side door never sounded loud until that night.
2 soft knocks. Too soft for a stranger. Too deliberate for a neighbor.
Lily,
Carl called, voice muffled through the thin wood.
open up. We need to talk before anybody else gets in the way.
The hallway light was off, so I stood in shadow. The only glow came from the kitchen, a warm rectangle spilling across the floor, stopping just short of the door. My hand went automatically to the deadbolt, fingers hovering but not touching. The house smelled like old coffee and cold air sneaking through bad insulation. Underneath, faintly, like a ghost of Sundays long gone, I caught the scent of my mother's lemon cleaner lingering in the wood.
I took a slow breath, letting my heart rate drop from sprint to steady. My phone sat in my palm, slick with sweat. I thumbed open the recorder app again, hit record. Red dot, live. Go away, Carl, I called, keeping my voice even. Sheriff's already out on the property. A short laugh. Oh, I know. I watched him drive right past. He's off playing hero at the workshop. Thought I'd come somewhere quieter. The doorknob rattled, a shallow clink against the latch. He tested it, not hard, yet. So, he said, you went digging under Daddy's floor, found his little stash? I froze. Every muscle wanted to react. I forced myself to keep my tone flat. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult me, he replied, irritation creeping into his voice. You think I didn't look? He was always down there, stomping around that corner like a dog guarding a bone. I just couldn't crack the stash before he took his tumble. The words hit colder than the draft under the door. Tumble, I repeated. That what we're calling it? He huffed. Look, whatever he told you on those tapes, he was spiraling. Talking about them like he was back in Nam with his rifle. You gonna base your future on the ramblings of a man afraid of his own shadow? And you're not afraid? I asked. Of some dirt and rock in a nowhere town? No, he said. Of the people who've sunk money into making that dirt and rock profitable? Little bit. That's why I'm here, trying to keep this in the family. The knob rattled again, harder. Open the door so we can talk face to face, he added. I ain't gonna hurt you, Lil. You're blood. The word blood felt like grease. I'm good right here, I said. You want to talk? We can do it through the door. Sheriff will be back any minute if you'd rather include him. A beat of silence. You think Dalton's gonna save you? Carl said, voice dropping. He couldn't even save your daddy. The hallway seemed to narrow. My fingers found the edge of the console table by the wall, closing around the smooth wood until my knuckles ached. What does that mean? I asked. Exactly. He chuckled, low and mean. I told John he had a choice. Sign, sell, or risk being another old vet who loses his footing. That creek's taken people before. Wet rocks, bad knees. Bodies go down easy. My stomach turned. You told him, I repeated. Before or after you brought strangers onto his land? You ever notice how the current pulls just right where the bank dips? He said, ignoring the question. One wrong step, and it does half the work for you. The air around me thinned. The watch on my wrist felt icy again, metal band biting into my skin like a clamp. He recorded that conversation, I said quietly. The doorknob stopped. What? Carl snapped. He recorded you, I repeated, louder now. Threats, offers, all of it. He left it for me, along with your contracts, your finder's fees, your buddies' names. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth through the door. He left a lot of things lying around, Carl said. Like that old phone. Funny how that number keeps popping up, huh? He knew. Whatever trick they were using, he knew it was working, or thought it was. You really think fake ghost calls are gonna scare me off?
I asked. The wood under his palm creaked as he pressed against the door. I think you're tired, he said. Fresh from deployments, dealing with grief you never handled. Stuck in a house full of ghosts. People make mistakes when they're tired. Sign things. Miss steps. Forget to lock doors. His tone went flat on the last sentence. Something metal clicked, light, but unmistakable. Safety off. I stepped back, slow, silent, each movement anchored in training. The hallway floor was cool through my socks. I'd kicked my boots off at the door earlier. The texture of the old wood grain under my heel felt suddenly too loud. Carl, I said, voice steady. If you try that door, you won't like how this ends. This isn't the creek.
You're not alone with an old man. You're at a crime scene that hasn't happened yet, and my sheriff knows exactly where you are. Another beat. Then, you really think you'll get here in time? He murmured. My phone buzzed in my palm. A text from Dalton flashed on the screen. Lights on. Stay low. ETA 2 minutes. Headlights swept across the front windows as a car turned up the drive. The deputy's unit, beams cutting through the living room and painting brief white stripes across the walls. Carl swore under his breath. Your timing always did suck, he said. The doorknob jerked once, hard enough to rattle the frame. Then the pressure vanished. Footsteps retreated, fast, crunching on gravel. I moved to the front window, staying low, and peeked through the edge of the curtain. Carl sprinted across the yard toward his truck, parked half in the ditch. His breath steamed in the cold. He slipped once on the frost, caught himself, lunged for the driver's side. Blue lights flared at the end of the drive. The deputy's cruiser blocked the lane, tires skidding slightly on loose gravel, siren whooping once before cutting off. Sheriff's office! A voice shouted from outside, muffled but firm. Stay in the vehicle! Carl froze for all of one heartbeat, looked down the drive toward the workshop where Dalton's headlights bounced between tree trunks, then made his choice. He dove into the cab, engine roaring to life. The deputy's door flew open. A figure stepped out, weapon drawn. Stop! Hands where I can... Carl's reverse lights flared white. The truck jerked backward, fishtailing, then slammed into gear and shot forward again, swerving around the cruiser, spitting rocks. I watched the mess unfold in quick snapshots through the glass. The truck's taillights streaked red toward the road. The deputy dove back into his unit, siren kicking up into a wail as he took off in pursuit. Down by the workshop, another flare of blue flashed between the trees. Dalton must have seen the movement. His cruiser swung around, bouncing over ruts, correcting course. Engines roared. Sirens echoed off the bare trees. Headlights carved frantic lines across the fields. Then, a squeal of tires. A crunch. The sickening sound of metal meeting something that didn't give. I flinched, the noise hitting some stored memory of armored convoys and bad nights overseas. Silence rolled in after, broken only by the faint echo of a siren winding down and 2 doors slamming. I forced myself away from the window. Okay, I whispered to no one, to Dad, to myself. Okay. The recorder was still running on the table, picking up the tail end of my breaths and the distant rattle of engines outside. I hit stop, then save, fingers sure now. Evidence, all of it. My phone buzzed again. Dalton. You all right? He asked as soon as I picked up. I could hear his breath, harsh with exertion, and the crackle of his radio in the background. I'm fine, I said. He tried the side door. Threats, hints about the creek, all recorded. Good, Dalton said. He just tried to outrun us. Didn't get far. I pictured Carl's truck nose deep in the drainage ditch at the bend, hood crumpled, his pride dented worse. Is he... I started. Alive, Dalton said. Mad as hell. Cuffed. I'd call that a good start. Relief crashed into me so fast my knees went weak. I sat down hard in the nearest chair, the wood creaking under my weight. "Sheriff," I said. "He knew about the phone. He practically bragged about it. Someone's helping him spoof it, make those calls. Someone with tech and access." "We'll trace that," he said. "State boys are already sharpening their teeth over this one. Between the recordings, the documents, and tonight's little joyride, Carl's about to get very familiar with the underside of the justice system." I exhaled slowly. "This isn't all over a patch of dirt," I said. "He thinks there's big money under there. Big enough that people are pushing, not just him." "I know," Dalton replied. "That's why tomorrow isn't just about arresting your cousin." I heard a muffled curse away from the receiver, then the distant clank of handcuffs against metal. "We're going public," he continued. "Court date, formal charges. We're dragging this into a courtroom where he can't hide behind concerned family and misunderstanding." My fingers found the edge of Mom's watch, thumb rubbing the tiny scratch at 4 o'clock. Time was still moving. For once, it felt like it might be on our side. "You want me there?" I asked. "I'll need you there," he said. "Your testimony, your father's words, the box, it all needs to see daylight." He paused. "I know courtrooms aren't firefights," he added, "but for some people, they feel just as dangerous." I looked at the back door, at the faint ghost of the word I'd wiped away. Soon. "I've been in worse places," I said. "And I've already been living in this story for 8 years without any finish. Might as well see it standing up." Dalton chuckled once, tired and genuine. "That's the Carter I know." "We good for tomorrow?" I asked. 1000, County Courthouse," he said. "Bring the recorder, the docs, and whatever backbone got you to pick up that first call instead of throwing your phone in the creek." He hung up. I stood slowly, stretching the stiffness out of my back. The house felt different now, not safer exactly, but less like a trap and more like a position we held. In the distance, the wail of the sirens started up again, lower and moving away, carrying Carl toward a cell instead of my doorstep. On the table, the recorder sat square in the center, tiny light, dark, waiting. I picked it up, feeling the familiar weight, the worn plastic edges. It had been my father's shield when his options shrank. Now, it was my sword. I turned it over and noticed something I hadn't registered before. A tiny engraving on the back near the battery compartment. A single word, scratched in with something sharp, letters uneven, but legible. Trust. I ran my thumb over the rough etching, feeling the ridges. "You better be watching this mess, old man," I murmured. I set the recorder down beside Mom's watch and the folded envelope of his final statement. Tomorrow we'd carry all of it into a public room. No more shadows, no more side doors and half-threats. If Carl thought dead men don't own land, he was about to find out just how loud a dead man's voice could be when his daughter hit play in front of a judge. The county courthouse always looked too clean for the kind of truth it held. Red brick, white columns, flags snapping in the winter wind. Inside, the air smelled like floor polish and old paper, with a faint sting of coffee that had been sitting on a hot plate too long. I walked up the steps in my Class A uniform, the fabric stiff across my shoulders, metal ribbons neat and square. Mom's watch hugged my wrist beneath the cuff, the metal band warm now from skin and movement. In my left hand, I carried a slim evidence box. Inside, Dad's recorder, the flash drive, the Murphy folder, the copy of his contingency note with Dalton's name underlined. Dalton met me at the courthouse doors.
He wore his dress uniform too, badge polished to a mirror. His eyes scanned the street behind me before they settled on my face. "You ready?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "But I'm here." He nodded. "That'll do." We stepped inside. The sound changed immediately. Footsteps echoing on tile, low voices bouncing off high ceilings. A bulletin board near the entrance was pinned with court schedules and notices. On today's list, in black letters that seemed too small for the weight they carried, State versus Carl Murphy. Preliminary hearing. Fraud. Conspiracy. Tampering. The words looked strange there. Not rumors, not suspicions. Charges. We moved down the corridor to courtroom 2. The heavy wooden doors stood open, the room already half full. Locals sat in the benches, shuffling, whispering. I recognized faces, Mrs.
Callahan wringing a handkerchief, Mr. Hanson in an old coat, hat in his lap. A couple of reporters from the small-town paper huddled near the back with notebooks. Carl sat at the defense table, in a wrinkled button-down and a borrowed tie. His hands were cuffed in front of him, resting on the table until the bailiff unlocked them. A public defender sat beside him, flipping through a thin folder, whispering in his ear. He looked up as I entered. Our eyes met across the room. His gaze slid from my face to the uniform, to the box in my hand, then back. Something like resentment flared, a flash of the same anger that had been at my side door last night. I didn't break. Dalton and I moved to the front row behind the prosecutor's table. The prosecutor herself, a woman in her 40s, hair pulled back tight, glasses perched on her nose, turned and nodded once in greeting. "Captain Carter," she said quietly. "I'm ADA Mercer. Thank you for coming." "I brought what my father left," I said, setting the box gently on the table. "He did most of the heavy lifting. I'm just the courier." She gave a brief, grim smile. "Some couriers change wars." The bailiff called, "All rise," and the room shuffled to its feet as the judge entered. Judge Phelps was older, with tired eyes and a voice that carried more weight than volume. He settled into his seat, robes rustling. "You may be seated," he said. We sat. The wooden benches creaked. My heart beat once, twice, then settled into a steady, disciplined rhythm. This wasn't a firefight. This was a different kind of battle. Evidence instead of rifles. Words instead of rounds. Same stakes. Lives. Legacies. Truth. Mercer opened. "Your Honor, we're here today to establish probable cause that the defendant, Carl Murphy, engaged in fraud, conspiracy to commit land theft, and tampering related to the death of John Carter." She spoke of Dad in formal terms. The decedent, the landowner. But the person she described was the man I'd known. Stubborn, protective, wary of anyone sniffing around his acres. She laid out the basics. Repeated attempts to coerce a sale, shady contracts, escalating threats, smeared fingerprints on messages. Then she lifted the recorder from the box with gloved hands. "The most compelling testimony, however," she said, "belongs to the one person who couldn't be here to give it." She turned the device slightly so the judge could see. "John Carter anticipated being painted as paranoid," she said. "He documented his interactions with the defendant. He described a pattern of pressure and fear. He left those recordings for his daughter, Captain Lily Carter, who is present in this courtroom today." I felt eyes on me again. I kept mine on the judge. "We will hear from her," Mercer continued, "and we will hear from him." Carl shifted in his seat, the fabric of his jacket whispering like sandpaper. The judge nodded. "Let's proceed." Mercer called me first. I walked to the witness stand, each step solid, measured. The wood railing felt cool under my palm as I placed my hand on the Bible, took the oath, and sat. "Captain Carter," Mercer began, "how long have you served in the Army?" 10 years, ma'am," I replied. "Active duty." "During that time," she continued, Have you been trained to assess threats and document critical information accurately? Yes, I said. It's part of the job. She nodded. Let's talk about the last 72 hours. When did you arrive back in Cedar Hollow? We went through it all. The call from Dad's number at the house. The words, "You don't have much time. He's coming." The workshop. The fresh tire tracks and footprints. The unlocked lock. The ammo box under the floor. Mom's watch ticking despite being buried 8 years ago. The letters with Carl's signatures. The note with Dalton's name underlined. The texts. "Don't trust cousin. Leave town." Mercer played the recordings. Dad's voice filled the courtroom, tinny but alive. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. I know what they're after. That boy, Carl. Carl's lawyer objected a few times, hearsay, foundation, but the judge overruled them when Mercer pointed to dates, context, and the contingency clause in the will, essentially appointing these as posthumous statements. When the clip of Carl at the workshop played, "Dead men don't own land, Uncle," the room shifted. People murmured, then hushed. The reporter's pen scratched faster. Mercer played the second recording. The creak, the boots, the fear. I see how easy it would be now, Dad's voice said. A slip, a push, one good crack on the skull, and nobody asks why an old man fell. The words hung there, thick. Mercer paused the playback. Captain Carter, she asked, when your father spoke on those recordings about feeling threatened, did you recognize his voice? His state of mind? Yes, I said. He sounded scared, but not confused. He was deliberate. He stored evidence. He named names. Whose name appears most frequently in those files? She asked. Carl Murphy, I said. My cousin flinched. Mercer then pulled out my phone, already bagged and logged as evidence, and had the text photos displayed on the screen for the judge. The smear on the door, the workshop shot. Did you receive these while in Cedar Hollow? She asked. Yes. Did you initiate those contacts? No, they appeared. The call logs were wiped after. The numbers were masked. She nodded, then handed the bagged phone back to the bailiff. Last night, Mercer said, did the defendant come to your home? Yes, I said. At what time? Approximately 2200 hours, I replied. What did he do? I described the side door, his voice, the threats about being tired, accidents, the creak. How he implied Dad's fall was less accident and more inevitability. How he hinted that whatever had happened once could happen again. Mercer played the recording from my phone. Carl's voice through the cheap microphone. Accidents happen on isolated property. I told Johnny had a choice: sign, sell, or risk being another old vet who loses his footing. Carl's tone in the clip, confident and oily, sounded worse in here under the fluorescent lights. His lawyer shifted, whispering at him furiously. Mercer finished with me, then Dalton took the stand. His steady, measured answers confirmed timelines, visits, Carl's previous "what if Lily never comes back" session in his office. He described Dad's fear, the change in his behavior, his efforts to file reports that never got far enough without more proof. Then it was the defense's turn. Carl's lawyer, a man in a tired suit with a harried expression, stood. Captain Carter, he said, approaching the stand. You've spent most of the last decade away from Cedar Hollow, correct? Yes, I said. And you didn't see your father often in those years? No. So any mental decline, any increased paranoia, any possible embellishment in these recordings? You wouldn't know firsthand, would you? You're basing your interpretation on the voice of a man you spoke to infrequently. He said infrequently like I'd failed something. I'm basing it on the man I knew, I said evenly, and on the specifics he stored. Dates, names, details. Paranoia doesn't usually organize itself into documented evidence and contingency clauses. A few quiet chuckles from the benches. The lawyer flushed. Is it possible, he pressed, that your guilt about being away is coloring how you hear him? Making you look for villains where there are none? The question stung, not because it was sharp, but because it grazed something true. Guilt had been my shadow for 8 years, but I'd spent too long letting it cloud my judgment. Here, I needed clarity. Yes, I said. I am guilty about being away. But guilt doesn't fabricate footprints by a creek. It doesn't forge loan documents or erase call logs. It doesn't leave fingerprints on threats written on someone's door. He opened his mouth, then shut it. No further questions, he muttered. I stepped down, heart pounding but steady. Dad's watch ticked against my wrist like a metronome. Finally, Mercer called the last witness. State calls Carl Murphy, she said. Murmurs rippled. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but Carl shrugged him off with a visible flash of irritation. He walked to the stand, cuffs off but escort close. When he placed his hand for the oath, I saw a faint tremor in his fingers. He sat. The wood of the chair creaked under him. Mercer regarded him calmly. Mr. Murphy, she began. You are the late John Carter's nephew, correct? Yes, he said. The word came out flat. You've been in financial difficulty in recent years. His jaw tightened. That's personal. It's also relevant, she said. Answer the question. He shifted. Yeah, had some rough patches. Those rough patches led you to arrange meetings between your uncle and representatives from a mineral extraction company, did they not? I introduced opportunities, he said. That's all. Opportunities that included contracts with aggressively unfavorable terms for your uncle, she replied, holding up the Murphy folder. And generous commissions for you. He looked away. She pressed, bit by measured bit, until his role as middleman, deal pusher, and family liaison was clear. What about the day of John Carter's death? Mercer asked. Were you on his property? His lawyer objected. He's not charged with homicide here. But the judge allowed a narrow answer. You may respond, Phelps said, within the scope of context. Carl swallowed. I drove by, he said. Didn't stay. Your footprints were found near the creek bank, Mercer said. Matches on your boots when Sheriff Dalton brought you in last night. Care to explain that? He hesitated too long. Just walked around, he said. You can't prove anything from dirt. Mercer didn't smile. She didn't need to. You told your uncle, on recording, she said, that dead men don't own land. You told Captain Carter last night that accidents happen on isolated property. Do you regret those statements? He bristled. People say things when they're mad. Doesn't mean, do you regret them? She repeated. He exhaled hard. Yeah, fine. I regret saying it out loud. There was a small collective exhale from the benches. He must have heard it, because he turned toward the crowd, eyes flashing. You all act like I'm some monster, he snapped. I was trying to save this family. You know what those companies promised? Money for everyone. Jobs. New houses. Instead, we got an old man clutching dirt and a soldier who doesn't even live here deciding what happens to all of us. He pointed at me. She gets to be the hero because she hit record a couple times and walked into town in uniform? The judge banged his gavel once. Mr. Murphy, you will control yourself. Carl laughed bitterly. What? I'm the only one saying it. He refused every offer. They were done waiting. I just helped things along. The room went deadly quiet. Mercer's voice dropped, cool. What do you mean, helped things along, Mr. Murphy? He realized too late what he'd implied. His eyes darted to his lawyer, who looked like he wished the floor would open. Carl tried to backpedal. Just pushing harder, being persistent, that's all. Did you meet with representatives from Barron Minerals or any affiliated company to discuss removing obstacles to their acquisition? Mercer asked. His silence answered before his mouth did. The prosecutor didn't press further. She didn't have to, not today. This wasn't a murder trial. Not yet. It was enough to show pattern, threat, motive, desperation. She stepped back. No further questions, she said. The judge addressed Carl. You may step down. He stood, shoulders tight. As he turned from the stand, his gaze snagged on the evidence table, on the recorder, the folders, Mom's watch glinting beneath my sleeve. His face twisted. You think you won, Lil? He muttered, low enough that it should have been just for me. But the room was too quiet. The words carried. This isn't just about you, he said. You brought outsiders in. Now nobody in this town is going to get those jobs, that money. That's on you. I met his eyes, the anger trying to bait me. No, I said, just loud enough. What's on me is making sure Dad's death isn't reduced to a line item in someone else's profit report. A few people in the benches nodded. Mr. Hanson straightened. Mrs. Callahan dabbed at her eyes. The judge called a recess. When he returned, he summarized. Evidence existed of coercive behavior, fraudulent contracts, active attempts to intimidate a key witness. The recording showed a pattern of threats. The recent actions, threats at my door, the attempted flight, indicated consciousness of guilt. He ruled that there was more than enough probable cause to proceed. Carl would remain in custody pending full trial. Additional charges were likely as investigations expanded. Then Judge Phelps did something I didn't expect. Before we adjourn, he said, I want to address the court. He looked out at the benches, then at me, then at the defense table. Too often, he said, we see families tear themselves apart in my courtroom over money, land, legacy. Most of those stories never leave these walls. Today, we heard the voice of a man who tried, in his own flawed way, to protect what he believed was his responsibility. We also saw his daughter honor that effort, not by violence, not by silence, but by bringing the truth into the open. He inclined his head toward me. Captain Carter, he said, your father's words found their way here because you carried them. This court recognizes that courage. Heat rose behind my eyes. I swallowed it down. He turned to the room. I expect decorum, he added, but I won't be angry if people acknowledge that. He banged the gavel. Court adjourned. The bailiff called, all rise. And then it happened. People stood. Not just because the judge had said so, not in the half-hearted way people usually do at the end of a hearing. They rose fully, shoulders squared, eyes on the front of the room. Mrs. Callahan rose, hand over her mouth. Mr. Hanson pushed himself up with effort, hat clutched in both hands. Even some of the deputies in the back straightened beyond regulation, something like respect flickering in their faces. Stand. Not for me alone. For Dad. For the recordings. For the idea that a dead man's warning, carried by a stubborn army daughter, had shifted the balance. For a second, the room blurred. I blinked the tears back hard.
Dalton's hand brushed my elbow, steady. "Take it in," he murmured. "He earned this. So did you." As people began to file out, a reporter approached, but Mercer intercepted her, giving me a moment to breathe. I turned toward the exit, evidence box still in my grip. Outside, the winter sun had broken through thin clouds, casting a weak, cold light over the courthouse steps. The air smelled like exhaust and frost, and something clean. Mom's watch ticked at my wrist. Dad's recorder sat solid in the box. The plastic flower petal from his grave crackled softly in my pocket when I moved. One fight was over. Others, legal, bureaucratic, maybe even technological, waited. D9s of land deals and mineral rights. But the core was clear. Dad hadn't died lost in paranoia. He'd died standing his ground. And now, so was I. The courthouse door clicked shut behind me, muting the buzz of voices still echoing inside. Frost clung to the edges of the steps, and when my boots hit pavement, a small crackle broke the cold morning air. Dalton walked beside me, speaking quietly into his radio, confirming Carl's transfer to county holding. His words were clipped, efficient. Secure, transport, no deviation. Across the street,
A handful of locals lingered, watching me the way people watch the first break of sunlight after a long storm. I wasn't used to attention. It made my skin itch. But something in their faces wasn't nosy curiosity. It was relief. As if they, too, had been held hostage by someone else's secrets. Dalton ended his call and looked at me. "You all right?" I exhaled slowly. "I'm steady." "Good," he said, "because this is far from over." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of diesel from a passing truck, mixed with the faint scent of old leaves crushed under tires. It tugged at the hem of my uniform, cold fingers brushing my wrist where Mom's watch ticked steadily. Dalton pointed to the evidence box I still held against my hip. "We need that flash drive. State investigators are setting up in my office. They've already pulled Carl's phone. If he's been talking to anyone higher up, we'll find it." "Barren Minerals?" I asked. "And whoever sits above them," he said. "Companies like that don't get involved in rural land without motive. Minerals, gas, rare earth metals, whatever it is, your land's worth more than Carl even understood. They wanted it badly enough to risk faking calls, tampering with electronics, pressuring your father." He paused. "And scaring you." Scaring me hadn't worked. Angering me had. We started toward his cruiser parked at the curb. The morning light glared off the windshield, scattering a bright reflection across the pavement. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Muscle memory made me tense before I even checked the screen. Unknown number. Again. I opened the message. One sentence. "You can't save what's already lost." A spike of dread, quick and sharp, hit the base of my spine. But beneath that, something else stirred. Anger, clean and controlled like a loaded chamber. "Carl can't text from holding," I said quietly. Dalton's jaw tightened. "Means someone else has his phone, or the system they used to spoof your father's." He took my phone, bagged it, and handed me his spare. "For now, use this. No calls unless they're through me." We got into the cruiser. The engine hummed low, warmth gradually flowing through the vents. As we pulled away from the courthouse, I caught sight of Carl being walked from a side door into a transport van. His wrists were cuffed, his face twisted with frustration, maybe fear. For a moment, just a moment, I wondered if he'd thought he could pull out of this before it got too deep. If the company's whispering in his ear had made him believe he was untouchable. But then I remembered the smears on my door, the threat at my porch, the creak. Dad's voice on that recorder, steady even when his knees weren't. No, Carl hadn't just stumbled into danger. He'd reached for it. When we arrived at the sheriff's office, 2 unmarked state vehicles were already parked outside. Men and women in suits moved with the brisk purpose of people who didn't have time to waste. Inside, the air buzzed with low conversation. A conference table had been cleared except for laptops, cables, a portable hard drive imager, and a stack of evidence bags. One woman stood apart, short hair, sharp gaze, tapping a pen against her palm. Dalton introduced her. Captain Lily Carter, this is Agent Marissa Hales, Cybercrimes Division. Hales nodded once, eyes taking me in quickly, as if assessing whether I was witness, victim, or asset. You're the one who received those calls? She asked. Yes. And your father's number was deactivated 8 years ago? Buried with him, I said. A flicker. Not surprise. Interest. We've cracked Carl Murphy's phone, she said, and his emails. Your cousin was incompetent, but whoever helped him wasn't. She gestured to the screen. A map appeared, nodes and lines, a web of digital routes. This is the signal path for the call you received 2 nights ago, she said. Whoever sent it bounced it through 3 servers, 2 in-state, 1 offshore. Classic obfuscation, not amateur work. Can you trace it? I asked. Already did. She zoomed in. The last server stopped not overseas, not in a city, but... I leaned in. That's a rural tower, I said. In your county, Hales confirmed. About 4 miles from your family property. My stomach tightened. Someone local. Someone who needed to be close enough to access the old line the number was tied to, she said. Someone who knew the land. Dalton swore softly. He had help. Hales nodded. We think your cousin connected with a subcontractor tied to Barren Minerals. They used a device to mimic your father's number. Probably grabbed the old SIM device from Carl's house or the storage unit his father kept. Had just enough tech to fake ghost calls. The room felt suddenly smaller. So the voice, I said. The warnings. We believe it was AI generated, she said. Taken from old voicemails, stitched, distorted to sound distressed. A cold pit opened in my stomach, colder than the courthouse steps, colder than the creek that took Dad. Dalton put a hand on the table, leaning in. They used her father's voice to scare her, to push her off the land. Hales didn't soften. Yes, and they would have escalated. Carl's arrest interrupted that escalation. I straightened slowly, not trusting myself to speak immediately. Because one part of me, the rational, military-trained part, accepted this explanation like a briefing. Logically, methodically. But another part, deeper, quieter. The part that had felt something real in Dad's message, refused to let go so easily. Captain? Hales said. You all right? I swallowed. Yeah. We'll need you to confirm any patterns in the messages, she said. We'll also need access to your father's workshop. There may be devices or cables left behind. Someone was manipulating signals out there. Dalton's face changed slightly at that. Wait, manipulating signals? The workshop barely has running power. Hales gave him a grim smile. Saboteurs don't need much. A battery, a booster, a signal tap. Rural areas are perfect for hiding transmissions. Dalton stood straighter. We'll head out immediately. Lily, you coming? I looked at the evidence box, at Dad's recorder sitting inside. Then at the new phone Dalton had given me. Then out the window where the sky had gone gray, snow threatening. I'm coming, I said. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and the metallic scent of approaching winter. We moved toward the cruiser. Snowflakes began to land on my shoulders, melting on impact like brief, cold whispers. Halfway to the car, my loaner phone buzzed. A text. Blocked number. Stop digging. I felt the anger spark again, steady, hot, controlled. I typed back one word, an answer Dad would have approved of. No. Dalton glanced at me. What was that? I showed him. He exhaled through his teeth. Good. Let them know you're not afraid. We climbed into the cruiser. Snow hit the windshield in soft, scattered dots. The ride out to the property felt different than before. Less dread, more purpose, more clarity. When we pulled into the drive, deputies already surrounded the workshop, markers in the dirt where footprints crossed and doubled back. Inside, the air was cold and sharp with the smell of oil and old lumber. Deputy Yates lifted a tarp near the back wall. "Sheriff," he said, "you better see this." Under the tarp was a small metal case. Not Dad's. Sleek. Modern. Wrong for this place. Hales knelt, gloved hands moving with precision. She opened the case. Inside was a portable signal hub, wires, receivers, a booster antenna, and a small black device with a blinking LED. "Bingo," Hales said. "This is how they spoofed the calls." But then her brow furrowed. And something else. She lifted a small memory card from a hidden slot. "This has been recording. For days." Recording. My breath caught. "Does it have audio?" I asked. Hales inserted it into her portable reader. A small speaker crackled. Static. Wind. Then, footsteps. 2 sets. Crunching on dirt. Voices. Men's. And then, a sound I recognized instantly. My father's voice. Not from 8 years ago. From the last year of his life. Raw. Real. Not AI. Not stitched. Not fake. "Stay away from my daughter," Dad said. "You touch her land. You answer to me." My knees nearly buckled. Dalton grabbed my arm to steady me. The recording continued. Carl's voice replied, shaken. "John, you can't stop this." Then another voice, one I didn't recognize. Low, confident, cold. "We don't need him to stop it," the stranger said. "We just need him gone." Hales froze. "That's not Carl." Dalton's eyes hardened. "Who the hell?" The clip ended abruptly, like someone yanked the power. It wasn't just conspiracy anymore. Someone else had been on that land. Someone who wanted my father gone. The workshop seemed to shrink around us, shadows lengthening. Dalton exhaled slowly. "Lily, this isn't about family greed anymore." I stared at the tiny memory card in Hales's hand, Dad's voice still reverberating in my chest. "No," I said quietly. "It's a lot bigger than that." I'd thought I'd reached the bottom of this thing. Turns out there was still further to fall. The workshop felt colder as Agent Hales replayed that last clip. Dad's voice, raw, breathless, alive, collided with Carl's and the stranger's. "Stay away from my daughter," Dad said again, tinny through the speaker. "You touch her land. You answer to me." Then Carl. "John, you can't stop this." Then the third voice, low and steady. "We don't need him to stop it. We just need him gone." Click. Silence. My mouth went dry. "That's the last time?" Hales checked the timestamp.
This was recorded the night before your father died. Dalton swore under his breath, a low, contained sound. We've got a conspiracy case now, he said. Not just fraud. And definitely not just accident. I stared at the metal case, the blinking LED, the little memory card now sitting in an evidence bag. You can prove this? I asked.
In court? We can tie the device to purchase records, Hales said. We can match the unknown voice if it belongs to anyone already in a database. We can cross-reference tower pings with company logs. It won't be quick, but it's doable. She straightened, eyes on me. But that's phase 2, long haul, federal. What you came back for, the land, your father's name, your own safety, we're already over that line. I exhaled slowly. The air tasted like cold dust and old oil. It hit me all at once. I wasn't just finishing Dad's fight. I was stepping into something bigger, the kind of shadow game I'd seen overseas. Corporations, quiet deals, people turned into obstacles to be removed. The difference here was simple. This time, the battlefield was home. The weeks that followed blurred into a strange mix of courtroom dates, signatures, and long, quiet drives between Base and Cedar Hollow. Carl folded faster than I expected. Faced with the recordings, the contracts, the text threats, and the little matter of trying to ram a sheriff's cruiser off the road, his bravado evaporated. His lawyer negotiated. Plea deals hovered like vultures. In the end, he pled out on fraud, conspiracy, and attempted witness intimidation. The homicide angle, what role he'd really played that day at the creek, would be part of a longer, ongoing fight with federal teeth. He looked smaller at his sentencing, standing in County Orange instead of his important man jacket. For a second, he glanced over his shoulder toward the benches where I sat with Dalton and Mrs. Callahan. Our eyes met. There was no triumph in me, no satisfaction, just a quiet, flat line of understanding. You did this, his look said, and my silent answer, you chose this. Barren Minerals took longer to bleed. Agent Hales and her team uncovered just enough shell companies, consultant invoices, off-the-books equipment purchases to bring down a few mid-level executives. The mysterious third voice in the workshop turned out to belong to a regional acquisitions director with a clean record and a very dirty phone history. They didn't go to prison for murder, not yet, but they paid. Fines, forfeitures. Emergency community investment funds poured into Cedar Hollow like water over a burn. Glossy press releases talking about misunderstandings and new commitments. I watched all of it from a distance. My name appeared in some articles, blurred in others. The veteran daughter who refused to sell, one headline called me. Another, land, legacy, and a call from the grave. I didn't correct them. What mattered was simpler. Dad's death certificate was amended from accidental to under review, investigation pending. The deeds were cleared. Clean. Filed in my name, free of forged signatures and secret liens. Carterland, what he'd sweated over, worried over, locked doors for, stood solid. Legally. Permanently. Mine. Ours. On a cold March morning, I sat across from a man in a suit at a downtown office, this one local, not imported. He laid a paper on the polished wood. Captain Carter, he said, this is the final offer I've been instructed to present. You are, of course, under no obligation to accept. He pushed it toward me with 2 fingers. The paper made a faint shh against the surface. A number stared up at me. More than I'd make in multiple Army careers. Enough to buy peace in a dozen other places far away from Cedar Hollow. All cash, he added. Clean. No back-end riders. Full transfer. You walk away free and clear. I thought of Dad's recordings. I thought of Carl's face at my side door. I thought of the creek, the tracks, the word soon smeared on my glass. I thought of my own voice in the courtroom saying, "What's on me is making sure Dad's death isn't reduced to a line item in someone else's profit report." I slid the paper back. "No," I said. The man blinked. "I'm not sure you understand." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "You're offering to pay me to erase what my father stood for." He shifted in his chair. "We're offering market value for resources that will be developed by someone, somewhere. Why not benefit?" "Because your someone, somewhere, already tried to make sure my father never saw another sunrise," I said, "and used his voice to scare me off my own porch." He flinched just enough to give himself away. He'd read the reports. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped. "I'm a soldier," I said. "I know how this works. You mark targets. You remove obstacles. You didn't count on one stubborn old man cataloging your every step. You didn't count on his quiet daughter coming back with both a uniform and a recorder." His jaw tightened. "If you refuse now, this land becomes a beacon. Others will keep trying. Responsible development is not what you came here representing," I cut in. "This land's not going on your balance sheet. Not now, not ever." He opened his mouth, then shut it. I stood. "Offer declined," I said, respectfully. He watched me walk out, paperwork untouched on the table between us. Outside, the air bit at my cheeks. I slipped my hand into my pocket, fingers closing around Dad's coin, one I'd started carrying next to Mom's watch. The metal was warm from skin and movement. On the drive back to the house, I passed the edge of the Carter property. The fields were still winter bare, but in the distance, near the workshop, I could see the faint outline of new fencing going up. Not to keep people out. To mark what was ours. Spring came slow to Cedar Hollow. Snow melted into mud. Mud gave way to stubborn green. The creek ran high with thaw, water rushing over rocks Dad had walked and cursed and finally died beside. We held a small ceremony out there with Dalton, a few neighbors, and a veterans group he'd quietly been part of. No speeches, just a new marker near the bank. John Carter, veteran, father, guardian of these acres. He held the line. I ran a finger over the carved words, the stone cool under my touch. Later, I started spending more time on the land, not pacing it like a sentry the way Dad had in his last year, walking it with purpose. I cleared the brush around the old workshop, brought in an electrician to run clean power, turned half the space into a proper office, maps updated, documents properly stored, passwords set with my own hands. The other half I left the same. Tools on pegboards, workbench scarred, thermos still there. I hung up my father's medal over the bench, put my own on the adjacent beam. Navy, Army. Different wars, same fight. I started working with Hales on a hybrid project, part Army liaison, part local fixer. We set up a small program teaching rural counties how to protect themselves from this kind of development pressure, how to read contracts, how to recognize predatory clauses, how to document everything. I saw kids like I'd been come through, angry, grieving, ready to leave town forever. I didn't tell them to stay, but I did tell them one thing. Wherever you go, don't let anyone convince you your story doesn't matter. On weekends, I invited some of the younger vets from nearby units out to the land. We walked the property lines, planted saplings, talked about building cabins for retreats. "You really turning this into some kind of sanctuary?" Mr. Hanson asked one afternoon, leaning on his cane as he watched us unload lumber.
Something like that, I said. For who? He asked. For whoever needs it, I replied. Military, family, people who've been told they don't have a place. He nodded slowly. Your daddy would have liked that. Once he got over being mad, you didn't just put up a fence and keep everyone out. I smiled. He had to learn to share. So do I. On a warm evening in early summer, I walked back to the cemetery. The grass around Dad's stone had grown in thick and green. Someone, Mrs. Callahan,
Probably had placed a fresh flower at the base. A real one this time. Bright yellow, petals already wilting at the edges in the heat. I knelt, the earth soft under my knee. Hey, Dad, I said. Thought I'd bring you an update. I told him about Carl's sentencing, about the ongoing investigation into the suits with clean shoes, about the offer I'd turned down and the program we were building, about the fact that I could stand on this land now without feeling like I was walking through his unfinished business. I won't pretend we're all okay, I said. You should still be alive. We should have had harder conversations sooner. I should have come home before a judge was involved. The breeze flicked at my hair, warm and gentle. But, I added, they didn't get what they wanted. Not from you, not from me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small plastic flower petal I'd taken from his grave the day the first call came. It was still there, edges cracked, color fading. Beside the real flower at the base of his stone, I placed the plastic petal. Past and present, fake and real, threat and legacy. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered. New phone, new number, secured with Hales's help. If this buzzed, it wasn't a ghost. I checked the screen. Unknown number, but with a legit caller ID tag. Hey, Captain, a familiar voice said when I answered. Hales. Just wanted you to know, our friend in acquisitions took a plea. Couple of his bosses did too. They won't be buying anyone's land for a long time. A slow, deep breath left my lungs. Good, I said. And the spoof rig? She added. All shut down. Whoever tries this trick again will have a much harder time staying hidden. I looked at Dad's stone. Appreciate the update, I said. Really? Hales hesitated. You going to keep the place? Yeah, I said. I am. Makes sense, she replied. Some legacies are worth defending. When the call ended, I stayed there a moment longer, phone warm in my hand, watch ticking on my wrist, recorder resting back at the workshop like a retired weapon. The wind rustled the leaves overhead. Somewhere a bird called, then went quiet. I touched the top of the headstone lightly. You were right, I whispered. You didn't have to shout. You just had to make sure someone was listening. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something I hadn't felt in this town in a long time. Peace. As I stood to leave, my eye caught the faint reflection of my own face in the polished stone. Uniform, tired eyes, jaw set, but softer now. A soldier, a daughter, something in between. I turned toward the lane, swinging the gate open with a soft creak. Behind me, the family name on the stone stayed clear. Ahead of me, the family land waited, legally mine, emotionally complicated, and finally free of the hands that had tried to steal it. I walked back toward the house, toward the workshop, toward the rest of my life. Love hadn't stopped Dad from dying, but it had reached me through static and fear and lies. It had taught me to dig, to stand, to finish what he started. It had crossed the silence he left behind, and I'd answered. In the end, that was all that mattered. Love can cross even the silence of the grave when the truth is at stake. If you believe legacies are worth fighting for, even against the odds, subscribe for true stories of quiet courage, family, and closure.